Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Neptune in the 12th house. And this is particularly special from the standpoint of Neptune ruling this house. So I am referencing a couple of sites that I looked up, one being the Astrology membership.com and the other one being sunsigns.org, and both of them talk about Neptune being at home in this 12th house, given its rulership, and that's the only place where it feels at home. And that makes sense because Neptune to me is like this mist that kind of spreads and maybe from one house to the next and doesn't really have much substance to it. And the 12th house, by virtue of what it represents, matches the influence of Neptune since it's connected to it. So talking about what Neptune represents, we can say idealism, spirituality, compassion. These are keywords we can use. And because it rules the 12th house, rules the sign of Pisces, that's going to be the same for that house. The 12th house is the house of suffering in some, I don't want to say it's just all suffering, but it can be. It can be hospitals, it can be prisons, places where people either do penance or do their time. When I say penance, it can even be like a monk cell. And I don't see that very often when I'm reading these different websites, because the 12th house can be the hermit's cell. And it's interesting that we call that a cell. I have never visited a monastery or anything like that, so I don't really know exactly what that entails, but I do think that it almost resembles like different prison cells, but I might be wrong about that. But that idea of spending time alone so that you can contemplate your life is certainly going to be the theme of the 12th house in whatever form it manifests as. And when Neptune is here, the person is coming from a place of immense compassion for others. And because of that, I just did the 11th house, which is talking about the collective. So we're talking about people as a group and feeling that sense of connection, all is one, and that sort of thing. That's definitely how I would see Neptune. But in the 12th house, this is specifically, I would say, the suffering angle of people's pain and being ultra sensitive to that, and also having perhaps psychic ability that allows the person to understand at a deep level, at a core level, another human being. And the reason that this is important is that I personally have seen a lot of times when there is like a news story and it's a terrible event that occurs. A parent beats their child to death because they wet the bed or something heinous like that. And the kind of comments that result, which you could say are well-meaning because they want to express their disgust that this child was killed, are, this is what should happen to the parent in some violent type of punishment, or death, putting them to death and doing that. And there's that lack of the bigger picture of understanding, why people do what they do, and to understand that that person very likely was beaten themselves and they just do not have the emotional capacity to handle their frustration and anger in a civilized way because they were not shown that themselves. And these kinds of things get when because I have expressed ideas like this, and people are like, oh, you're saying that these people should get away with it. And the thing is, people have binary thinking that that's all. Either that person's bad, this person's good, and there's no in between. And if somebody does something bad, then they're just completely worthless. They have no redeeming qualities, And there's no reason why they did what they did. They just did it out of their complete evil. And a person with Neptune in the 12th house understands so well that there is a reason that that person was suffering too, and that they're going to continue to suffer, that this is a tragedy for the person who loses control and does something like that. Now they've dug themselves even deeper. And I think that, even though I didn't read anything about this, I could see somebody with Neptune in the 12th house visiting people in prison because they feel that connection so deeply with suffering that they want to be almost like that Christ-like figure who goes and takes on the karma of other people, because the 12th house is the house of karma. So that's how I would view it. Now, having said that, there can be a lot of problems with that kind of tendency. And one of the biggest ones is an empath has to protect their energy. They have to protect themselves so that they do not bleed into other people's, or that other people's energy doesn't bleed into them, and they, become too influenced by others in an adverse way. And being a psychic is something that comes naturally to you if you have this position, but your judgment may get impaired if you're not able to be objective enough, because a lot of times when people sympathize with another person, I think they're really sympathizing with themselves in a lot of ways. They're really remembering the times when they felt that kind of pain, and they can, to me, that's the true empath, is that they know what it feels like, and so they have compassion for others. It's not something that is abstract. It's something that they know full and well because they've dealt with it. But the problem is that when you're too emotionally involved, enmeshed with somebody else, then it makes it very hard to see things from an objective sense, and it can lead to being taken advantage of, being deceived, which is, a form of being taken advantage of. It can lead to all kinds of complications in your life, and that doesn't help others ultimately, because you can only help others when you are also taking care of yourself. And so that's something to be very careful about, is not to lose that beautiful compassion, but understanding that suffering is something that you didn't cause, and you can't solve it. That's what I think they say that in AA, is this idea of when you feel like responsible for somebody else's addiction, that you remind yourself, I didn't cause this and I can't fix it. I can't solve their problem for them. I can be a support system only if I'm really supporting them quitting drinking. If I'm supporting them continuing to use, then I'm actually part of the problem. And it's very hard for somebody who is in this situation to really be that tough about it, because you just can sense that pain that drives them to drink or to use. So the other thing too is, we talk about karma, there's also something called ancestral karma. Now, according to the Astrology place membership.com, I'm just going to read exactly what they say, and I'm going to make a comment about that. There is a strange haunted feeling about the 12th house, and it reminds me of steps through time. Neptune here can act as a sort of medium for long forgotten ancestors. a flowing vessel of collective sorrows, sadness, sacrifice, and unfulfilled dreams. At this point, it must also be emphasized that this is the house of self-undoing, and planets here are in danger of becoming the victim scapegoat for far-reaching family conflicts. There may also be emotional, mental, drink, and drug problems in the family history. Neptune here can feel victimized and be labeled as troubled and the source of all the problems in the family. The family may have a long history that contains some mental illness, victimization, or unfulfilled dreams. And then they say victimization, self-inflicted isolation, guilt, martyrdom, and unnecessary suffering. The 12th house has an abundance of meanings from spirituality, religion, mental health, institutions, and the unconscious past. So what I wanted to say about ancestral karma is that I thought that was the 4th house. What I would say, because the 4th house is childhood, I would say that the 4th house is your lineage, and that would be ancestral karma, even though I would say that karma, when I'm talking about karma from past lives, past life influences would be the 12th house. That is my take on it, because I think I did read something that the 4th house is ancestral karma, which basically means we could just say if you have certain dysfunctional traits that run through, both sides of your family tree, and they seem to be, these repetitive patterns. And some of them may not be things that you can blame on DNA. I mean, like, for instance, sexual abuse or something like that. But certain dysfunctional behaviors beget them, in the next generation, unless a person is conscious enough to put a stop to it. So with the 12th house, I think it's more on the unconscious level, where you inherit these, because of your own personal karma, which I would just say is your soul's history, not anything related to punishment. There can be good karma, if you will, good acts done. The word karma means action, so good acts done in a prior lifetime. But people tend to just think karma means punishment. And so based on past life influences, that might affect the type of family and family situation that you're brought into. But you can see, even in just this lifetime, that there may be these certain traits that you identify with that are a bit on the, what we would call dysfunctional side. And some of that may have some roots in the karmic connection that you have with others that are in your, I was going to say soul group, but I'm just going to say your family, because I don't know if the two are going to be connected necessarily. And definitely with Neptune and with the sign that rules Pisces, we are talking about the victim archetype. And with Neptune here, the scapegoat, like they said that very well, because that does tend to happen where one individual in particular is dumped upon because the others feel like they can do that there is something about that person that, compels them to do that. I would say, in kind of reflection that I have done in my life, that, and also there's somebody, I don't know if it was a psychic person or somebody who's just like a spiritual teacher, was talking about this as well. And I think it was just talking about narcissism, because that can come up with a family where one or both of your parents are narcissists, where they are favoring one child, which is called the golden child, or maybe more than one, and they are creating the scapegoat. And the reason the scapegoat is picked is sometimes because that child is very sensitive, and they know that they have a kind of a lack of emotion in their own makeup, and they know that something is missing. And so they inherently can see the good in the person with Neptune. I'm saying if it's you, but I'm just saying in general, they can inherently see the good in the scapegoat. And so they react by being abusive, to that individual. The purity that they can sense coming from that person, the compassion. And even like if you're the type of person who can see through their aggressive tendencies and you can see their pain, you can see the little boy or girl in them that wasn't loved, and you try to love them enough to get them out of that, mean spirit, they may double down on you because it's like they don't feel loved, and so they don't want somebody who is going to break that narrative. It's like they live in that negativity, and it's like they want to dwell there. And that's, that's another video worth of speculation on that. But just saying that you cannot love somebody into healthy behaviors unless they let go of the resistance to that. And so it's very important, even if you're somebody who wants to be a healer, to be a person who has discernment, where like if you're going to help somebody, when enough is enough, so that you don't go overboard and possibly become an enabler, which actually allows them to continue doing what they're doing. I mean, that's the irony of it. So it's not that easy sometimes to resist that, because there's a tendency for us to feel like we want to help somebody as much as possible and not pull away. We might feel that we're rejecting them, but we have to protect ourselves. And the other thing that I want to say too is that obviously a person like this, you're going to be very otherworldly, and you have to ground yourself. You have to make sure that you're not living in a fantasy realm. So there may be a greater need for somebody like you to be very aware of the practical things that you need to do in your life. Do not be an escapist, because, that's the other thing too. They talk about Neptune can be about addiction. And the reason addiction exists a lot of times is because a person feels compelled to avoid something. There's an avoidance, a resistance to a reality in their immediate environment, where they have to deal with something, whether it's a relationship that's gone bad, their childhood memories, something they don't like about themselves that they want to forget about. And that desire to escape sometimes can come with substance abuse, and that can lead to all kinds of other problems like addiction. And also another area is that sense of becoming one with the universe or with God. Neptune, because it doesn't have boundaries, there's that longing, I think, for that divine connection where I want to know God. I don't want to just read about God. I want to feel that I'm in God's presence, or that I'm, merging with God. And so people like this have to be careful that they don't get too away from the world, where they are trying to escape this mundane reality. And sometimes it can be because it just doesn't feel good enough. It seems like, that's the idealism that feels like the world is so colorless compared to your fantasy life, or your dreams. Your dream state is the 12th house. So there has to be the ability to stay here and now and be functional in the 3D reality. And if your sun is in Pisces, for instance, and you have Neptune in the 12th house, you really have to do this, because you will naturally be like that anyway. I would say, too, if your moon is in Pisces, and if your sun is in any of the other water signs, Scorpio or Cancer, you're going to be even more empathic, or the moon, I should say, too, any of the water signs. And so watch out for a tendency to really feel like there are no boundaries between you and another person, and that if somebody else is feeling something, that it affects you too. So if somebody else is unhappy, then you're unhappy. Those kinds of situations can arise, but they are obviously going to be very taxing, and that is also this, and that can lead to codependent behavior too, because you might be very people pleasing. I want everybody to be happy. Well, that's a beautiful sentiment, but it doesn't necessarily translate to being able to make it happen. We're never able to make other people happy. And if it seems like we are, it's very temporary. People have to make happiness their goal in life. And how many people do that? People may escape, and they may, get drunk every weekend. They may go, shopping, retail therapy all the time, trying to just distract from their feelings, numb themselves out, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, wherever you go, there you are. So it doesn't work. And we can't do that for another person. We have enough on our plate just trying to find happiness within ourselves. And so kind of absolving yourself of that responsibility of making other people happy can be so freeing. And then you can actually do it. That's the irony, is that when you feel kind of like weighed down by other people's demands because you don't have the ability to say the word no in a kind way, obviously, then you're harried, you're kind of drained. But then when you are like saying, do I feel like I really want to do this? Or I'm feeling resentful about this, and you're willing to respect your feelings, it's amazing how that can benefit you, where you really have more to give others, of a higher caliber of giving. Because sometimes people give and they're kind of resentful, and people can sense that if they're intuitive enough, that the other person really is reluctant and they didn't really want to do it and they felt coerced in some way. So, so that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, please check my offerings. My website is rainamoonastrology.com. The link is below. Take care. Bye.